see that
Which
they're
one
part
should
of the
I
meeting.
download? The Windows app or
Okay.
Microsoft?
If you want
Edge?
me, just call me back.
Okay.
Just do that.
Okay,
It's all on.
okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is Thursday, July 23rd, 2020. We'll forego all our other stuff and just go to the discussion of care funding and
Okay, Julie, we are here. I do want to introduce,
I'm Allison Swatters. I'm an audit director at our Kansas City office. So I'm not directly on your work group, but I'm on a resource out of Kansas City. And I do spend a lot of my time working on single audits and compliance testing for various programs and grants. And seeing a lot of our clients receive CARES Act funding, especially in the higher ed and the healthcare industries and not-for-profits too. And I think everybody's prepared for a challenge coming out because of all the new requirements and the new programs and the new testing that's going to be involved. So I will hand it. Julie and Leanne are going to be handling the majority of this meeting. But if you have any questions or anything that I can answer.
That's what
Okay.
we want to do right there.
all right.
Thanks.
Okay, can I get Julie back in here?
Can you see me?
Jeff, what's that Jeff doing on here?
Jeff's got them all.
Can you click on
I
that?
got everybody watching what
Is that
everybody's doing.
Can you click on it?
Can't see you though, Debbie.
Click that.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like you watching 5 squirrels, huh? Oh, wow. I don't
Well,
have that
Leanne,
much
we're gonna
time.
watch you, but we'll listen to Julie talk. How's that?
Alright. Yeah, I think
So
Julie
maybe she
dropped
goes
off and
here.
came back on to try to get
It's out of the
video.
full screen.
Oh,
She might be in full
Good to see
screen.
everyone.
Good to see you. Turn it up.
Just let us know when you're ready to get started. Oh, there we go. There's Julie.
can I get it louder?
Yay! I do exist.
There we go. All right, Julie, yes, I'll let you take over. Everybody has the handouts that was passed out to them, or that you emailed to me last night, so I'll just let you take over from there.
Perfect. Well, first of all, we really just want to thank you all for your confidence in BKD. We're excited about the opportunity, and so, with that, we want to be as efficient as we can with our time, but just to, I think everybody knows who everybody is, but as I mentioned, I'm the director, the not-for-profit practice, and we also have Leanne Peaton, who would be your main contact. We have Woody Cousins, which I believe you met her earlier. And then we also have Allison Swader there in person. So thank you, Allison, for being there. And with that, before we get started, any general questions or thoughts about timeline? We're thinking we'll probably take about 30 minutes of your time, but if you'd like more time, we're happy to spend as much time as you like.
Okay.
We approved a contract with them, or?
The contract will be ready for next Tuesday's agenda.
Okay.
So currently, we're still working off that first 35 hours.
Okay.
There was just a question about the contract, but I told them we're working on that, Jill.
Yes, absolutely. All right, with that, I just wanted to touch on the agenda here. So you can see the working group. We've met Debbie and Kristen, and we had a really good session the other day. And so with that, we've developed a list of questions for you all. And there's some additional information that is more about kind of timeline, key milestones we need to hit. We do have a formal work plan that's been developed, and we're happy to share any of that that you'd like. But in the interest of your time, kind of these key items here, when we talk about priorities and action items, those are the things that we want to cover with you all. So the first thing we wanted to talk about, and Debbie and the working group, we talked a little bit about this, is what your thoughts are on a needs assessment. So based on kind of that we're doing with some of the other folks in different counties and municipalities, we have done these assessments. Sometimes with, as many changes as we've all experienced with COVID, what you think your needs are last week may not be your needs going forward. And then obviously that's going to take a little bit of time to, put that together, put that out to the community, ask for comment. So it sounds like you will have a fairly good sense of kind of the directions that you want to go, but that's really kind of the first step is, do you feel like you need a needs assessment, or would you like to proceed based on the priorities that you set as the commission?
What came out of the working group meeting?
Well, we decided the needs assessment, by the time we figure out and have more meetings about that it could change.
So that could push our timeline down the road an additional 3 weeks. And your needs could be different after those 3 weeks, so we decided that maybe a needs assessment wasn't necessarily, we'd rather go forward with an application and not do a needs assessment.
So what time frame are we hoping to have applications where they can start applying?
We're hoping 30 to 45 days.
And we actually do have a call right after this, to start working on the development based on what comes out of this meeting. So, we're actively working in that direction.
So what does a needs assessment look like? What is
So
it?
a needs assessment is really going to be almost like a little mini, it's not an application process, but it's basically asking, various school districts, not-for-profit organizations. You're putting it out to the community if there's any healthcare organizations. And if you decide to provide distributions to businesses, really anything along those lines, you're going to have to kind of leave that up for probably at least a week to allow them to respond. And then you'd want to have, go through that. You're going to need to then prioritize that. So, just the needs assessment can take, 2 or 3, potentially even 4 weeks. Obviously we can do it as expedited a process as you'd like, but just the timing of getting the community response is really what's going to drive that.
So it's more like a survey of the community to see where the greatest
Exactly.
need is.
So basically, we're gonna need like the schools to go ahead and spend the money and then apply after the,
This is more of just like a survey to ask them what their needs are.
And then go into the application.
yeah.
Right, so it would delay that application process
Okay.
further down the road.
And I can give you an example. So a few weeks ago, there was, one of the needs assessments was, and in this particular case, it was related to school districts. And then there was an outbreak, and the group had to actually shift gears into testing. And so that's an example of where if you do a needs assessment, you also need to set expectations with the community that these, we understand your needs, but then there could be some overriding considerations that you need to address.
So, my initial thought was that, yes, we needed a needs assessment because I don't know what their needs are. So how do we write a grant that addresses a school district? And, yeah, they've said they needed thermal imaging cameras or temperature cameras, but they haven't told me anything else that they need. And so maybe,
That's why we figured the application would allow each one to tailor and fit what they want.
And if there's 50 applicants, that means there's gonna be, they're gonna do 50 interviews for needs assessment versus if you just make it part of the applications, the very first one is needs assessment, why you need the money and what's the purpose of it.
Julie, does, in most of your applications that you've already done, is there a type of a needs assessment at the beginning of the application?
Exactly. I mean, you're going to have to provide the justification. Again, the other option, I mean, at this point, given the speed of which, we want to try to get these funds out to the community, there's a lot of different things we can do in terms of still setting aside the funding allocations, knowing they could change slightly, but by retaining some of these funds for later, that gives you the flexibility, and that if somebody comes up with an emergency request that you really want to try to fund, then you do have that flexibility. So, I mean, to be honest, our recommendation would probably be to go ahead and continue to move forward and not take the time on the needs assessment. If there are ways to solicit comments from your community, I don't know if you really want to get into any of that, but we can continue based on, the methodology that we put forth, still giving you an opportunity it'll take us 30 to 45 days to put that together. That still gives, a week or two that just people are going to be giving you feedback from the community. You probably have a pretty good sense, at least in broad strokes, of what those needs are, I would think.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Chris? You good?
I'm just trying to think through it, but, I mean, obviously, in my mind, if there's, based on some of the limited pots of money that they have there for the initial period or whatever, I mean, if that's all the money that there is for, say, schools or whatever, so, we'll have to figure out what the need is versus what the funding level is. And that could be different for every school. And so that will be a challenge.
Yeah, the other thing too is you sometimes run the risk of creating, a false sense of, if they tell you, to your very point, you could end up with $20 million of need knowing you have $9 million. And so, are you creating a false expectation just because people think, oh, I put all this out here, maybe I'll be able to get some of it. So again, that's just another consideration.
I mean, I think that's fine with some of the other criteria that are in there, but, when you get into minimum and maximum amounts of award, is that total for any one entity, or is that per application period, or, but I think you could probably limit it based on that too, is that, no single entity could be eligible for any more than X.
So I think those are some of the questions we're gonna get to,
Right.
is there a minimum or maximum
Right,
amount?
yeah, I read them all.
Is
Yep.
there, how many times can they apply?
Yeah, one of the things that we did, so we'll come back to the needs assessment, but hopefully by the end of this session, we'll know for sure which direction that you all would like to go. To that point, one of the things that we did is I took what Debbie and Kristen had put together related to the allocation methodology. And so these next few questions talk about, none of this is obviously set in stone. These were just kind of jumping off points in terms of how much of the funding. I know initially we had talked about a third for what would be retained by the county, what we would want to do for future use, and then what we want to distribute. And so just based on that, let me show you, if you do have the methodology in front of you, what we put together is looking at kind of pre-application funding reimbursements. So these would be reimbursements only, which means we'll develop all the requirements that they would have to submit so that, we'll make sure to have all the documentation that we need. But there may be some things that you're gonna need in order to get the schools open, those kinds of things. So we kind of call those mission critical. And so we have external reimbursements, which these are all proposals subject to whatever you all want to do. We have $500,000 now. I believe 250's been identified, and then there could be another potential 250 as well. If we don't spend it, obviously that kind of flows into the other buckets of funding. So this helps us also kind of project how we spend going forward. We also talked about internal procurement for the county. So again, to the things, if there are things you want to purchase related to the schools opening, there's some incremental funding there. We talked about just internal procurement. So and I want to make sure that I did understand everything that we talked about, Debbie and Kristen, that some of the preparedness that's going to be needed by the county that we'll need to spend funds on. Some of the first responder items, Red Cross, and then any potential additional county needs. I basically allocated that based on the same proportion as what's currently been identified. Doesn't mean it has to be that, but we're just trying to kind of create an objective methodology so that if people come back and say, well, why did you allocate certain functions? These are the needs that were identified. As you start to hear about the different needs in your community, and as we develop the application, if we see, again, there's an emergency situation, we can reallocate these funds. That's the nice thing about it too, is we've got a little bit of time there. We talked a little bit about reimbursements then externally. So things to think about there, what we had identified were hospitals, just some businesses and nonprofits. So again, then what we have called additional applicants would be other categories of funding. And then the last section is really, as we talked about, future use funds. Again, it gives you flexibility. You can, all of these funds can, until you've committed those funds and initiated the reimbursements, these funds can flow back and forth. This would be, unless there's a justification to change the methodology, this would be it once we kind of set that with the commission. Does that make sense?
Do you guys have any question about that or the budget part? Like she said, it would always be changing, I'm sure, depending on the needs and the applications we get in.
So we gotta set the allocation amount in order to allow people to know what kind of pot of money there is to apply for. And so where did all these numbers come from?
Basically a third, and we kind of outlined some different criteria of different things that they may,
So did these come from BKD or did
Yes.
these come from you guys?
all together. I think both of us together.
So explain the difference between external and internal, because I don't follow.
So internal would be what's retained for county use, whether that's the preparedness areas, your first responder, anything that's related to the county. If you're either going to be purchasing on behalf of someone else or some other, like a school district, and you're going to distribute that, that's going to be considered external, because that's going to be for benefit outside of the kind of the core county needs. Does that make sense?
Well, so you said purchasing for someone else, so that would be an external procurement. And I don't see any of that on here. I see internal procurement, but I see all external reimbursement.
Right, so external reimbursements are gonna be things where, so for example, let's say that you did distribute funding to the school districts. That's gonna be an external, and they're gonna have to spend the money and get reimbursed. So we are going, and again, we can open this up. The assumption is that we would not do advanced funding, meaning that you're not gonna give $10,000 to an organization without them having spent the money. If it's an emergency need and they don't have the capability to spend that money, that would be something where the county could purchase on behalf of that recipient.
The internal procurement's like if we bid out for the thermal imaging cameras and we bought them and then we gave each school how many ever. That's what I understand that as, right?
That's my understanding as well.
But I think kind of ship's already sailed, like the schools have already been
Right.
buying them themselves. So that might
So-
need to go to.
So it'd be an
external
internal
reimbursement.
procurement that we were buying on behalf of someone else.
Right, but
So
we know
we-
we could get it cheaper if like we bid
Right.
out to get them all for everybody.
Okay,
So same thing with PPE, how we're currently buying PPE and giving it to other people, that would all be internal,
right.
Procurement.
yes.
And depending on what the applications look like, that may change at that point.
Right, if they've already bought it.
Right.
So then one of the questions that I had on municipalities, we had $250,000. Seems like a fairly low amount for all municipalities within Cole County.
I think that's prior to the application, so if they had expenses that they incurred during the main part of the pandemic at the beginning, that they had to emergency purchases, that 250 was for those kind of reimbursements of stuff they've already spent prior to, so from March 1st until now. And that doesn't exclude them from getting money later in the application process, that would just be mission critical, so things they had to have at the time that they purchased already.
But it looks like to me, sorry Sam, go ahead.
Well, Mayor Turgeon had called me yesterday, and I guess they're starting budget, their budget procedures now for their upcoming budget. And she wanted to know if I wanted to come sit in on that, because I don't know if they're figuring some of this into their budget, next year's budget or not, which, I don't know if that would change. Because, what we're saying is this can't be used for anything that's already in your budget. What do you do with like a city where their budget, when does their budget year start, October?
October.
I think it's November 1st.
Okay,
I think that's a little different as to whether your budget was in place as of March when we got
okay.
the money
Okay.
versus you approving an additional
Okay.
budget after the fact.
Evidently, they've got some things that they're gonna put in their budget for,
I think if they're budgeting things, that they wouldn't be eligible for CARES funding.
that's what I'm asking.
So I'm not sure it wouldn't work any different than us getting a grant after our budget's approved. You wouldn't put that in there until you know you got approved for the budget.
Right.
Sounds like Sam says they're putting it in there,
Assuming.
making the assumption.
I don't know that you can make that assumption
Yeah,
until you've been approved for the
I don't know, I
application.
just told her, yeah, the meeting's today, and I thought, this is, I said, no, I gotta,
So really, I mean, if we outline these budget amounts, then really all that's left for all the municipalities is the $3 million. Unless some of those things fall into other categories.
Right, so you could consider, I mean.
Preparedness, $1.5 million. We don't know who would be eligible for
Right,
that.
I mean, I think that there's some discussion as to how that internal procurement and external reimbursement gets broken up. I think it was just kind of a placeholder. Like when we put preparedness, that's not just county preparedness, that could be municipalities as well. It was just kind of a placeholder for. I think those are the decisions we're looking for, is there something in particular you want money set aside for, or a bucket for?
Or where do you want to be at the end of the game? You know, so much per each school, or it's kind of hard to tell that right now because we really don't know what their application is going to look like, so.
So you go from 9,000 students in the Jeff City Public Schools down to, I think Brazito Honey Creek is like 50 students.
And we talked about
So,
that with
yeah.
Julie as far as how to, you know, so much per each child at that school district, or just wait and see what the applications look like, what they're really wanting. Because again, they've received some of their own CARES money, or some of their own money for their district. So what they're gonna request may look a lot different from each school.
And the other thing too is we think through trying to have these funds spent by the end of the year. You know, having that $3 million as a contingency or future use, you know, as each month goes by, we can free up, you know, additional funding. You know, I think there'll be a big push, obviously, when the application comes out, and at that point, you know, we may decide we want to go ahead and release a little bit more. That'll be a month down the road. But this does give us a starting point to start working on, you know, structuring the way the application process looks electronically, what's going to go out on your website. So having those decisions, at least as an initial starting point, will be really important to help us kind of move to the next phase.
Yeah, we just don't know what we're gonna, you know, November, December, we could have a vaccine and everything is rosy, or we could have a full-fledged epidemic where we're gonna need that $3 million. You just
Yeah.
don't know. You really just don't know.
I think holding 3 million to the end just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because depending on the funding mechanism and the application process, is that, you know, you may have some people that may not qualify or may not qualify fully, and so I just think you're holding too much money till the end. I mean, maybe $1 million or whatever that is, but I mean, some people may not take advantage of the grant if it doesn't fund it enough, and so now you're just pushing more money down to the end. So to hold a third, I think is,
So maybe that's where we need to start, is what do you guys see as far as holding that you want to spend later?
I'm total opposite.
well, I mean, it's going to be,
I
if
wanna hold
you
more.
wait till December and then try to spend $3 or $4 million, good luck.
I think
What we were thinking is, you know, so that's roughly $600,000 a month.
It's already
So
spent.
essentially, we'll be projecting and I'm sure we'll even be projecting weekly probably, to the extent of kind of where we are, as if we need to redeploy, and being able, you know, we can always come back to you all as necessary, those key funding decisions. So, for example, if you felt like you wanted to, you know, shift $500,000 into a different grouping, or $1 million, I mean, that's totally up to you all.
I had talked to Debbie a little bit, and I thought, well, maybe we start out with 3 million, do 4 million in the middle, which is gonna be our biggest, and save 2 million to you know, closer to the end, and then just, you know, pray to God that, yeah. You just don't know what it's gonna be in November and December.
What?
So we got,
So that's 600,000 a week. I think you said a month, but it's 600,000 a week. The way I see it, I mean, if you start distributing September 1st, you got 4 months to get rid of $9 million.
She was talking about the 3, so you could start
Just the
freeing
3.
up the 3 at 600,000 a month after that, and start, like, you wouldn't hold it all till the very end. After you got that initial application, you could free up additional funds as you get further down the road. So like, you could free up an additional 600,000 every month going forward after
You
that.
need to free up more than that, because after September, now you need to free up $1 million a month, because you got 3 months to spend it. So,
But that was the point, that you could.
Yeah, again, it's just, whatever you all are comfortable with, trying to give you some sense of numbers that you would feel comfortable with. So, would you rather hold on to 2 million? That allows you to then shift $1 million into, and even if we just said, internal versus external, we don't have to get into at this point, what do you want to distribute versus what do you want to retain? What we have seen is about 55% of the total award has been retained by the county or the municipality,
How much?
and then 45% has been distributed.
45 has been distributed and 55 has been held.
Yes.
In the first phase. You do 45 million or 45% in the first phase?
Would you consider that the first phase, Julie, that they're doing that, or just being budget and reserved half of our 55%?
Yeah, I would say that's being prudent. Everybody is holding a contingency fund, just, and again, it just gets down to as every month passes, you're exactly right. The numbers are going to get smaller and smaller in terms of what you want to hold and what you need to spend.
But they're spending 45% right off the bat. That's what you're saying. And then what if they're doing 2 phases? How are they doing it? Are they going a third, and then holding a third?
No, so what they do is we'll put together and have the application go out. Once that application goes out, then they can reapply as often as they like as a subrecipient. They just have to prove the need, and it would be on a reimbursement basis.
Okay, but us having the money, we're gonna spend 45% of it today and hold 55% until September. Or are they spending 25% now and then 20% in phase 2, which may be August, and see where things are at?
Right.
Am I wording that right? Am I confusing everybody?
Yeah. That's why, so let's say you said, okay, we're gonna distribute of the 9 million, we're going to keep, just gonna say, make it easy, we're gonna keep 3 million. So that's $6 million, we're gonna distribute 45% of that.
45% of the 3 million.
that was 6 million.
6 million.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're keeping 3, using 45% of the 6 million.
It's the same thing that they got there. You're holding 3,
Yes.
they're gonna distribute 3, and then 3's gonna come in phase 2. So it's 3, 3, and 3. It's just like a third.
Okay.
But
If you
So
got-
then, while I'm talking about phases, on this sheet, it's got phase A, B, C, and it's got 2 Cs. So are those their ranks or priorities or steps? Or is this
Yeah.
just a arbitrary letter given to each one?
Sorry, I didn't step on you there. Phases A through E were kind of already identified. So when Debbie and Kristen and I met, those were already identified. Areas F, G, and H were kind of those future additional items that we talked about, how we wanted to allocate those. So I believe 2.5 million has already been identified through those phases A through E as current needs that, Debbie and Kristen, they know those are out there that they hope, based on, we would expect to fund those.
So really, Jeff, C, the 750,000 internal purchases, we've already started that process with a few, plus
Okay.
our agreement that we're going to sign with BKD. And last time we talked, we kind of talked about reimbursement of the municipalities and schools opening. So those first three are really the ones we've kind of talked about, not really necessarily dollar amounts, but those first three were kind of things we have talked about.
Okay.
After that, it's just kind of throwing numbers out there and brainstorming. I think all of those can be changed.
Okay, but they're not in an order or a priority. These are just arbitrary letters assigned to them at this
Right,
point.
all you have to remember is C, we've already identified internal things, and those are kind of listed there that we've already kind of approved on our end. Not necessarily the whole 750,000, but we do have,
We're probably at 500,000 with POs that are already issued and agreements that will be signed.
So professional services would be part of BKD or
Yes,
office enhancement,
that's the window screens in the recorder and assessor's office.
and then administrative costs.
Well, administrative costs should be BKD. Professional services is the additional security guard that you've already hired over in
the courts.
the courts.
Okay.
And then there was quite a few contracts for the EMS department that we've already issued POs on. So to go back with the whole concept, are you guys okay with the 3 million at the end, and let's just work through the application process? And like Julie said, we could open it back up if we need to, you know, if needs change, or if the recipient wants to apply again for something new that come up.
It's all arbitrary, I'm fine
I
with
know.
it, and that way,
It could
you know,
change.
we just don't know what's gonna
It's definitely
happen.
gonna be a fluid document.
Yeah.
Moving forward, I mean, it's not set in stone that it's this amount and this is all we can do. It's going to be moving as we move through time.
All right, Julie, I think that we're just gonna go with that for now, that it's a moving target, and that if something changes with that, we'll let you know.
All right, so we'll move forward with that and then continue to monitor that. All right, so in talking about the subrecipients, we've talked about school districts, municipalities, if we need to do testing, nonprofit healthcare. Is there anything else, like for example, would the commission want to fund individuals for any reason?
I'm not sure. Is a grant allowed
I mean, I'm not gonna say no, but, I mean, I'd just like to see the scoring process to dictate what someone's eligible for the funding. So they could apply, but if their score's only 10 points out of 100 or whatever, then they may get very little. They may have to come up with 90% to get the 10%, so.
Okay. So we could address that through the scoring mechanism.
Do you see that happening in any of your other counties or municipalities that you're in now?
There's only one, and it's because they have some individuals that are really hard hit, you know, either needing an assistance or because of the, you know, just the illness factor, where they may actually need some support for housing and utilities. But it, you know, it's a very limited amount, because that can get, obviously just can get very time intensive to try to manage that. And especially from a risk assessment standpoint, It's really hard to be able to document all of that. So it can be done, and a few are actually doing that, but it's I would say it's a smaller subset of those groups.
Okay. When you opened your application process up, and maybe you can explain that you see it as not every different thing that you would apply for, but apply for what you need, and then if you need something else, you apply again.
Right.
And that's what you've been doing in other entities.
Yeah, I missed that last part, I'm sorry.
And is that what most of the other entities are doing too?
Right, exactly.
So it's like if you apply for the thermal thermometer, that's one application, then they come back and say, we want to get one of these misters that we can spray the halls, because I had somebody in trying to get me to look at that, because I think Elias has already bought it. And that would be a different application for a sanitizer mister that you would use in the hallways and in the bathrooms and all that. That would be separate, yeah.
Right. And so, so other than potential, carving out a potential for some individuals, any businesses that you think you'd want to fund? I mean, that could fund businesses related to testing potentially, or there may be enough need to like have.
So you said fund businesses related to testing. Aren't they getting paid to do the tests?
I'm sorry?
So businesses that are doing the testing, aren't they getting paid to do the test? I mean, the labs, the businesses, I mean, they're charging people to do the tests, and the labs are getting paid to do the test currently, right?
Right, and so again, so we have some that, you know, if they, like, they've had an outbreak, so they're trying to, you know, obtain as many testing supplies to do testing. Therefore, there are certain companies that, you know, have more buying power than others, so they may, you know, they may go ahead and fund those if that's important to them. Again, so we see some that do. I will say most do not, because when you went to your data point, exactly, I think you guys are going, by the time you fund your schools, your municipalities, and any nonprofits that can potentially help individuals, I mean, that's another way to think about it, and healthcare, you know, that pretty much uses up most of those funds.
Now, are most, say like the bigger, are they funding them like at 100%? Or are they doing like 80% we give and then the school comes up with 20% or 75, 25? I mean, what are most of your schools?
Cost sharing?
Yes, cost sharing of anything, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Not really. It really is if they can show and prove the need, they're just funding it. Now, we did talk based on the scoring criteria, you know, if they meet certain scoring criteria, maybe, you know, if they score 6 out of 10, I mean, Debbie had mentioned this, they're about 60% funding. I mean, those things definitely can happen. So, you know, that's really, once we get these answers, kind of our next session, Debbie and Chris and I are going to be working on, but we'll be coming back to you all. So we'll be having more decisions probably to ask you about, but, you know, asking you that scoring criteria, on that, let us know your thoughts. That's kind of next big thing.
hadn't even thought about sports.
Oh, no, scoring.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to get into sports. Okay.
Alright, so we'll continue to move on with, as we've identified, with potential individuals, potential businesses, but that would be more the exception than the rule. That'd be fair to say.
Yes.
And then, now unless you've got, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that they're trying to award, seeing most probably would have about 50 subrecipients to keep it manageable, just so that everything can be spent between now and the end of the year. Doesn't mean it has to be, but that's just kind of based on what our thought process is. So one of the, we did talk about the fact that we would only do probably through reimbursement and not do advanced funding, because that does open up the county to more risk by giving funds out and then not being able to get all the required documentation and meet those compliance requirements. We've talked about people can reapply as often as they need to, whether that's on a monthly basis or a weekly basis. Go ahead.
No,
Given the short time frame, I would say probably weekly would be fine, again, if they identify a need. But I think where we can kind of manage that a little is thinking, is there a minimum award that's not, it doesn't make sense, whether it's just, it's going to be more effort than being able to serve the community. So, I don't know if that's 5,000, 10,000, 2,000. We want to talk about a maximum award, but there should be like a de minimis amount that, beyond, it's just too low, it just doesn't make sense.
do you guys have an amount in mind that would be not worth the time for an application to be processed?
So just some of my notes. So I was good with probably no more than 50 subrecipients. Good with reimbursement only. And then how often can applicants apply? And I put until funds are gone in each category. And so, if schools are applying, there should be only so much funding that goes to the schools. And so, and basically that would be the same for municipalities and others as well. So, just so that one person doesn't just keep reapplying and getting all the money.
Exactly.
And then,
But is that up to us to decide? If they're a higher priority,
well, if it's
or they meet the criteria and requirements and they dot all the i's and cross the t's and jump through the hoops.
if it's a blind score, so, somebody could apply for all kinds of stuff and you could
Well,
award
that
it.
kind of then generates the bigger, more difficult question is, if they can reapply, is there a maximum award? Is it, is it 250, 250,000? Is it 100,000 at a time? What are those? Because, if you make it, really $500,000, then your pool of money could be going to 3 recipients, in essence.
Well, and so part of your application could be have you been awarded a grant through CARES funding before? And if they answer yes, then they could get dinged a little bit because they've already gotten some money.
Right.
So I think a minimum ought to be around 5,000 and a maximum ought to probably be, I was just thinking 200,000, but that's just some of my thoughts. That doesn't mean that not everybody would apply for the maximum, but you gotta have some type of upper limit. Could be 100.
That's what I was thinking 5,000 minimum and 100,000. And then if the need is more than that, you can always, make a special,
So is that all phases?
Just
Well,
per-
application,
Per application, yeah,
Per application for all phases?
could be.
Yeah,
So,
it would be per application.
Between emergency stuff versus if we do businesses and if you do private individuals for that matter, if they want to apply for their $82 electric bill for assistance or their $32 water bill. So if you have a minimum, you're going to tell them, see ya. Which, I mean, if you want to do that, that's what
I'm
I'm
okay
telling
not having a minimum as long as you want to go through them all.
After August 4th, I'll go through them all. Sounds like it's gonna be a while before we get the application ready anyway.
Yeah.
And you could probably change the application if you're gonna go out for individuals versus municipalities,
Okay, so
schools.
that could be a different phase then. We can address that at a different time.
Right.
I think one of our
Okay.
counties, they allocated so many $1,000s that could be used for utilities and rent. And I guess it's just a pool they could, I don't know.
And if we go that route, that could be a different phase that we do it. If we have I guess maybe phase 1 is what I'm calling it, not the phases on these. But phase 1, we go through an amount and maybe there wasn't as much need as we thought. There's money left over, then we can take it and use it for a phase 2 for helping, families that didn't have jobs, whatever, for whatever reason, had to stay home with their kids. So,
I think that's a harder thing to verify.
I think that's a harder thing to track too, as far as, do you pay the individual, do you pay the utility company so you know that it actually got paid to them? I think it makes it harder to track on our end. I think there would have to be some specifications, like maybe we would pay it directly to their utility company and not to them, I don't know.
yeah, I'm not saying it's gonna be easy, but we're paying $270,000 for somebody to do that for us, right? To check that stuff. I mean, that's part of what this is for, right?
That's additional.
We still have to answer to our auditors.
Yeah, and some because compliance will be an issue if you're funding individuals. But depending on I don't know if you have nonprofits in the area that might provide rental and mortgage and, assistance where you could fund, a certain amount to a nonprofit that could then, provide those funds. I still would say it should be rather limited because these funds will be audited by the federal, all the different entities. And those costs, if they're not documented well and don't have those, they're gonna be deemed unallowable and the county will have to pay those back, so.
There are organizations like that that offer like the rent assistance, the utility assistance programs for individuals that already have like the structure set up for it. They might be a good organization to partner with, just to pass down like a lump sum, if that's one of the objectives that.
They would still have to give us an accounting at the end, right?
Yeah, you put
They
in
keep a
that,
strict accounting.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna have to,
you
they're
put
gonna
in
have to,
what you'd like to see out of, use, what you'd like to see their funds used for. And then they have to report back to you.
Well, I'm not the one that thought of this. There's other counties that are doing it, so obviously it can be done. It might be a real pain in the bum, but it's just one of the questions that's out there, if we're gonna do it. Or we can look at it later on to see if there wasn't the needs we thought, and we have money left, then we can go and address that to maybe help them. Just an idea, a question, I guess.
Well, Julie, I guess is, when the first application comes out, there'll be a press release that goes with it that explains to entities, like the county is first gonna start with reimbursables and then also maybe the schools and the municipalities, letting the public know that it's not quite time for them to start putting an application in yet, and then when we change the game, then a new press release to try to get different entities to do the application. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think you could certainly have the individuals wait to apply through the application process, which, you know, gives the time and then the mechanism for us to make sure that we have all that documentation in advance to protect the county.
And so we're looking pretty much at around the 1st of September then, we would start,
Have the
Receiving.
application ready and receiving applications, I guess. Is that reasonable to think, Julie?
You broke up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. That we'd have the application out there and be receiving applications back by the 1st of September?
Yeah, I mean, we're saying 30 to 45 days. That's our goal.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was, I think the first week in September is about 6 weeks out.
Chris, did you?
And can I just go back, so did we settle on whether the maximum award is 200 or 100, or are we gonna split the difference? And
You want to do a minimum of 5,000 for this stage in the game? We may change it when we go back to talking about individuals or companies that can handle the individuals for us. The 5,000 and then 150,000 is max per any one application.
But what about the small schools? If they don't go together as a district and put in one application, they submit applications separately. The small schools might need to buy thermometers, and that's not gonna be $5,000.
I think 5,000 is too high, but were you just using that as an arbitrary number, or were you seriously thinking 5,000?
Well, I was seriously thinking 5,000, but.
well, I think on
That's
school,
way too low.
something like that, you could
Or
still
high.
make exceptions.
Okay.
And then don't have any
The
rules, we
limit?
don't have exceptions in.
Well, but if
Kinda like
schools are one of our
Yeah.
first priorities,
Okay,
They might have
250,
small as 50.
500. I think it's the of how much money we'll have in it just going through those applications. And the amount of time you spend on them is why she's wanting to come up with a limit, you know? So somebody isn't turning something in every week for $25 to get reimbursed for something, you know? So
But
$250.
$250 to, say, little bitty school means probably a lot more than 5,000 to great big school.
Sure.
So I don't know what the minimum, there has to be some minimum, I agree. I don't know what that magic number is. I mean, is it $100? Is it 250?
You're just gonna have so many applications if your limit is that low, and, I mean, I think they can bundle stuff, I mean, so it might be thermometers, and it might be PPE, and it might be other things, but maybe it's, you know, gotta have a minimum somewhere, otherwise it's not worth the time to review it.
Right, and I think that's what it comes down to.
What do you think of that number is,
That
though?
we develop a minimum, you know, again, if we keep it very,
So maybe make it for schools, no minimum, sorry.
for individuals to where you could have a lower threshold for individuals than you would for, you know, other organizations that are applying.
So Chris just mentioned maybe not having a minimum for certain entities such as schools. So does that work to have exceptions to our own rules ahead of time, basically? Has anybody
Well,
done
yeah,
that?
I mean, so if we really wanna open that up, then it probably makes sense to set the minimum very low, just knowing that, you know, there'll be a cost to process that as well as a risk, you know, so based on what you feel like that need is.
I think they could add things together.
yeah, you
I'd
could maybe go to like 2,000, which 2,000 doesn't necessarily buy you that much.
Not even in a small school, you know?
No,
I mean, I think we're just talking about schools here, really.
Yeah.
I mean, so, I mean, everybody else should be able to meet 5,000 pretty easy, so, I mean, whether it's they bundle stuff together to qualify for the grant or whatever it is. I mean, I think those are gonna be successful either way. But
And we can do a big grant round, and we can do a small grant round too, and if there's something left, go that route. I think we need to ask them too, if they don't get all of the funding, will they take a portion of it, or else we can pass it down to the next one.
right,
Are you guys okay with 500 or 1,000 or something?
I don't know.
Okay, Julie, we're not gonna agree or disagree on that one probably, so we'll
So-
just,
well-
Okay, well, we'll keep moving.
What's your magic number right now?
5,000 for everybody else and no minimum for schools.
Where are you at?
I'm fine with that. I
Well,
think,
there's two of them, go with it.
So then do you have a max amount?
I'd say 100,000 for now.
100,000?
That's what you said, right?
yeah.
okay, Julie, I think we got it.
If you go higher, you just have to articulate on why.
Schools,
So final, what was the final?
for schools, there's no minimum, but the
No
maximum,
minimum?
for schools. But the maximum is 100,000 on everybody. But other than schools, the minimum is 5,000.
Okay.
Debbie, can you say that again? I'm sorry, the sound is kind of fuzzy.
Yeah. There's no minimum on the schools.
Okay,
Everybody else, it's a 5,000 minimum. And everybody has the cap of 100,000
okay, thanks.
Per application.
per application.
Got it. Okay. Then, the last two items are, is there a conflict of interest policy that will address, any appearance of conflict between the commissioners versus the applicants? Do you already have that in place? If not,
In our
we can,
procurement.
Julie, let me send you our procurement policy and some grant policies. You can take a look at those. If we need to, revise that, we can.
All right, perfect. All right, and then the last is, just to confirm, as we start getting into the scoring of the applications and any funding decisions, will there be a process if there's a tie? I don't know, the number of people that'll be involved in the decision, on the decision team in evaluating that. We'll bring to you, our recommendations. But we just want to be sure we have an objective, documented process in the event there's a tie.
So you guys would be the final decision. It would have to be 2 out of 3, unless you want someone else to have that authority.
So my initial thought was, what would they be willing to match? So if they ask for 100%, but they say we'd be willing to put in 20%, if their match is extremely high, they would win in a tie, depending on what they'd be willing to match. They can ask for whatever they want, but I mean, what would they be willing to match if not awarded 100%?
I mean, I think that's a good start with it too, and if they're both saying they're willing to match 2080, then the next thing would be,
Yeah, then we just have to, I don't know.
I mean, I think if we come down to a tie, us three can each individually make some kind of assessment score and add them together and see who's his highest, and, because we can sit here and argue all day about it. I mean, not that I would do that.
Oh, yeah, you would.
Yes, they would.
Wait a minute. I wasn't supposed to throw myself under the bus there, and then you all backed right up over me. So, I mean, I think, we can do some kind of, same way you've been on committees where we've had grants and you have to go in there and you score them, and it'd be the same way that we each individually do, and then throw the score out there. It's not gonna be all objective, obviously. You may say, I like this one better. You don't know the name on it, but if you see it's for school items and the other one was for, whatever.
But if they're, so say if you got two schools, and I'm just picking on
Yeah.
schools, but, so two schools and they both asking for the same thing and,
Then we'd split that baby right in half. Well, you take
That's
half.
in the Bible. Yeah.
No, I'm serious though. That's what I would offer them. Say, hey, you all tied.
But I mean-
will you take half?
so that's where the 3
Whatever.
million comes into play that we have set aside in reserves, that we could take some of that and we could fund both if that becomes an issue, so.
And when you're dealing with, like, I'm just talking about our side, with regional homeland security grants, whenever we score those, 90% of them, everybody agrees on. So if you get 20 of these applications, you're gonna agree on 18 of them. There's only gonna be 2 that y'all are gonna have any issues with. And that's just y'all talking amongst each other. I don't think you wanna have them weight it and grade it, and then turn it over 50 of these to you and have you then grade them again. I don't think you wanna do that. That's a lot of work.
I wasn't planning on doing that. I was hoping that kind of part was gonna be done. Okay, they qualify. Here's how it's scored. And here's how much money you have. Here's the line.
Right.
And then if you get down to that line and there's 2 of them right there that are teetering it, then we have to make some kind of decision. Then so be it. But we get to that point.
But I think these are gonna be by the time it goes through this process, I think it's gonna be a lot simpler for you than what you think.
I hope so.
I hope
I
so
think
too.
it will.
You don't know how hard I think this is gonna be.
I agree
So-
with Jeff.
I hope you're right. I think it's getting easier since we took somebody on to do this part, because I don't want to write the application, I don't want to write the rules.
Right.
Apparently the rules are changing periodically anyway, so.
That's true.
Federal government?
Oh,
Well, it's like the PPP loan, it started out at what, 75% salary, 25%? And then they changed it to 60/40, and then they extended the time that you can spend it. So who knows, if we're still in the middle of it here in December, are they gonna extend it or give us more money or,
So essentially, I mean, even if the commission developed their own process, at the end of the day, would it be the 2 out of 3 or,
Yes, Julie, that's what it would come down to,
Mhm.
2 out of 3.
I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's where it would be,
Yep.
so. And we will make the scoring criteria and the way that that's presented, we'll have that documented and objective to the point, that you all can feel comfortable, that we can justify any decisions that are made, from that point.
And Julie, I'll just intersect here. I know we talked about a working group versus coming to the commission every week with this kind of information. Are you guys okay with that? Would one of you guys like to be on the working group? And then with the people that are in here would be the working group plus Matt if he wants to come, and whoever can make it, so that we can continue working weekly with BKD. And then, what are you guys' thoughts? Do you want us to bring this presentation every week? Do you want to work through this?
I'd like to be on the group, but,
And according to whatever, this can only be one if we're not on the agenda officially. Any decisions that are made, any, approving of spending any money is gonna have to come to the full commission. So we understand that. So it's
I don't have a problem with you guys doing the working group. I just want to see notes and minutes from the meeting. So,
So if we provided like a weekly written update to the commission based on kind of our progress and next steps, and then every 2 weeks, if there's any,
yeah, just a recap of what you discussed and, yep, just minutes of the meeting, so.
Any reason you can't voice note it or record it, and we can, for our listening pleasure later on,
Listening pleasure.
while we're driving down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'll have to ask Brian and then, if I put it on my phone, it just takes up so much, I don't know how to do
Okay.
it, other than that.
And the only other thing to note is that may not be 2 out of 3, it would be by commission approval. I mean,
Right.
because somebody could have a conflict and,
Yeah,
so it'd be just based on our basic rules of order. I mean, there could be only 2 of us here, and so,
yeah, I can't do much with the hospitals.
I mean, that could fall, like, I mean, one of us may not be here, and so, I mean, it may be that one of us gets to vote twice or whatever that entails, so.
Yeah.
Depends on what time of day we do it. I got my Snickers in the afternoon, I'll be all right.
But Julie, all final
Meetings at
decisions will have
Dave's.
to go to the commission, so,
Afterwards, for sure.
okay.
Sorry.
Did you
Where's your
have
sign
anything
out?
else, Julie, that you wanted to talk about with your,
Yeah, I think that, I really I know there's a lot of details to work through, and appreciate your diligence. Is there anything else, as you start thinking through for next week, that you want to make sure we prioritize or focus on, other than the kind of items we already have identified?
Julie, do you need other things from us besides those policies? Is there any items currently that you want?
I think you were just gonna send us copies of the contract, the policies, we'll start reviewing those. And then, again, my goal would be kind of these things that we have for action items would be, for next week. One of the things we wanted to talk about is any non-financial programmatic data, kind of thinking through that for the working group. And then thinking through, to everyone's point, at some point, we'll want to stop the funding stream to allow, everything wrapped up by the end of the year and just be sure everything's spent. So we can talk through that as well. And then, going forward, this is really just a rolling list. I mean, if we knock out 10 of these items, we're just gonna keep going down the list. So, there'll be some things added, probably nothing will be taken off until it's resolved. We will give you an update. Like I said, I have a call with our technology folks about the application this afternoon. So I'll send out, minutes and let you all know kind of where we stand there and confirm the timeline.
So, do we have anything on our website at all for giving people any direction to say, we don't have anything yet, keep watching here?
we can start that if you'd like.
Because it sounds like Sam's getting a lot of visits about it. Had a few. I think they're kind of watching the paper and the news, but I don't think it'd be a bad idea to do a press release that this is where we're at in this right now.
Julie, if you have something, I don't know, when you guys are hired and, maybe there's some kind of press release, we can start with that. And then, since we're gonna sign that next week, and then we'll maybe start a blurb on our website, about the care leave application to come or something.
Yep,
That's a good
I'll
idea.
get that to you.
Yeah,
We just need somewhere to direct people, because I know there's gonna be questions.
Sure.
People are getting anxious, and, I mean, heck, if there's money hanging out there, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought having money would be fun, but I hate this.
Can we expand on this spreadsheet to include what's being spent where, so that we have a better idea of, just like professional services, right now that's security, courts, some additional employees, admin costs will be BKD, and then any of these others, where it's just kind of a generic spot holder, but, what do we think? Preparedness at $1.5 million, what do we think that looks like? I mean, what,
So
just put
should-
some stuff down. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly what it's for, but what do we think that $1.5 million is gonna be spent on?
Okay. And Julie, did you catch all that? We'll just keep expanding on the
We'll
spreadsheet.
put together kind of that detail, and then also create the mechanism to have a projection kind of rolling. So, you can see where we are, people want to see, depending on how y'all want to do that. But we'll have that ready for next week as well.
Okay. I would like to suggest that maybe we can have the meeting next Monday with the working group on Monday, because we got a few of them that are gonna be out the rest of the week, so if there's any way we can do that. And then maybe the following Tuesday, maybe we'll have an update for the commission on the regular agenda.
That sounds perfect.
And then again, of course, we'll work on getting that contract done on Tuesday.
Yes, yeah, Shauna had to drop off, but I know she's working on it, so we'll get that to you as soon as we can.
Okay. You guys have any more questions for them right now? There's lots of questions, but.
Well, we appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll try to make it as painless as possible for you.
All right,
That's what we want to hear.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
You want me to go get Lynn?
Yeah.
Turn that off?
Sure, yeah, please.
So we're talking next Tuesday, 2 PM again? Next Monday, I mean, 2 PM?
We're gonna start this coming Monday. Oh, I didn't say what time, did I? What time do you think?
You got BOE,
Yeah, in the
Monday.
morning.
Is it in the morning?
It's in the morning.
So let's do 2:00.
2:00, okay.
Well, we got, well, you guys don't have it, but I think we got first. Oh, that's on, yeah, on Monday.
Yeah,
or on
that's Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Yep, so 2:00 on Monday, the 27th. So, I'd like you guys to all still be the working group. Does that sound okay?
Monday at 2.
How many we got on BOE?
Fair?
I lost count.
Two,
Just two now?
yeah.
Okay, I lost count.
They're not having the whole full-fledged fair. Yeah? Live music.
All the rides,
One dropped out.
cats and dogs would be good.
You still got your turn.
They're gonna go out of session, I think.
49.
No.
No, we're just done.
No blinkers.
Oh, because I don't.
Oh, well then you
Then
can
we
turn it
just
off.
need you to turn it
Windows on
off.
it, or-
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 5 window.